things in the world, and all the cultures and religions respect it. This has been throughout history. All the cultures have respected kindness. And we're going to respect it in the future as well, guaranteed. So it has attributes like generosity, good-heartedness, altruism, courtesy, positive behavior, goodwill, and good intentions. Blessings, all of them blessings, to be bestowed upon someone else or sometimes ourselves, because we need to be kind to ourselves too. And sometimes we forget that. So how does it express? We know of the many ways that it can express. A small act of kindness, like helping an older or disabled person to cross the street, smiling, talking to someone when they're in need. It makes us feel good, doesn't it? It certainly does. Kindness can solve so many problems without expecting anything. But the interesting thing about that is, good always comes when we send kindness out into the world. I know Dan and I were riding over here Thursday. He had his trailer behind the truck, and he has a Ford 250. It's a fairly decent-sized pickup truck and a pretty big trailer because he hauls some big equipment sometimes, just for fun. Someone asked me what he's working at. I said, oh my goodness, he's not. His working years are, he works hard. He works hard at playing. But his working years are over. When he was working, he was wearing a suit. And I'm going to bring a photo of him wearing a suit sometimes, because most of you won't believe it, but he did. He did. But anyway, we were on the way over here, and we were between Long Beach and Gulfport, and you know what it looks like there with the boats on the side of the road and all the piers that have been washed up. And if you haven't been over that way, go over that way sometime. And they were slowing down to one lane where a truck was loading some of the sand off the road. So Dan blinked his lights, and I'm accustomed to him doing that. And a big truck that was in the left lane pulled in front of him, and then he blinked his lights. And Dan said, well, you know why he did that, don't you? And he said he was simply saying thank you. And I said, well, isn't that interesting? I've observed that, and but I think now, isn't that a nice way to be courteous on the road, and to say, come on in, and let someone in a long, long, long line. We've been there, haven't we? When we've been in the one lane or the other, trying to merge into the other, and no one will let you in. That's an act of kindness too. And then saying thank you. Most of us raise our hand or whatever to say thank you, but whatever way you do. And it would cut down a lot on road rage, wouldn't it? If we could just be kind. He was also telling me the other day that we had observed the last year or year and a half, there's been a man that walks the beach there in Waveland, and I don't know how far he walks, but and he's distinct because you recognize him. He walks hunched over a little bit and very fast. Well, I hadn't seen him in months, and I had expressed to Dan I was worried and hoping that he was okay. And he said he saw him the other day, and that there was a friend that had his arm and was helping him walk. So I suppose he's been ill, and the friend showing the kindness to help him get out and do something he enjoyed. So there's an expression of kindness too. The small and the large things that we do, they all matter. So what are some of the benefits of being kind? I had mentioned that it's good for you. Kindness releases those feel-good hormones. You know that, don't you? Yeah, it makes you feel good. So notice, when you're kind, you just feel better. Takes a load off. That's some of those chemicals working in the brain. They're making you feel better. So you're tempted to do it more often because you see the things that make us feel good. We're tempted to do those again and again and again. So those chemicals will make you feel good about yourself. So don't hesitate to volunteer to do a kindness. You'll feel better for it. Kindness is good for your heart and your mind. You've heard having a warm heart. Well, actually, if you show an act of kindness to someone, you're able to release the hormone called oxytocin, which helps to expand the blood vessels, and in turn reduces issues like blood pressure and strained heart vessels. So I want to be a warm-hearted person for a lot of reasons, don't you? I certainly do. Several reasons. Another advantage of kindness includes ease of pain and anxiety. The person experiences feelings like inner joy, happiness, self-alertness when he's stepping up to help. In case you're anxious and nervous, look out for ways to help others. I know I've told you before, but one example of this was a few years ago after an elderly relative had passed on. She had no children, and I had gone to visit her often in Florida, and she named me as the trustee. And actually, I wasn't sure if I should have thanked her or not, but that can be a discouraging job sometimes. You must deal with a lot of people and answer a lot of questions. But that particular day, I'd spoken with, someone had called with a question, and I can't remember, it was a cousin that had left me feeling troubled, and I didn't have the answer yet. And so I was struggling a bit with how I was going to handle that. And I certainly was going to handle it with integrity and honesty, but sometimes there's not a clear path, so I was a little bit troubled and praying about it. And it was about that time I received a phone call from a lady that lives a little north of here, and she hasn't been able to come for a long time. She's disabled. And she said, "Miss Judy, if I don't pay my light bill today, they're going to turn the electricity off." And I said, "Well, which company do you have?" And thank goodness it was Mississippi Power, because their office is just down the road. And so I said, "You know what? I'm glad to do that. I'm going to just go take care of that right now." And the amazing thing about it was Dan was home, so he rode with me down there, and I went in, and I've done that a few times. The people in the office were so nice, and we took care of it. Got back in the car, and I said, I've had a weight lifted off my shoulders. Whatever I was thinking about before, I have forgotten it, and it will take care of itself. And I prayed about it, and the answer to that prayer that came, but it came in a way I wouldn't have envisioned. It came in a way that was a gift to me and a blessing that I could help someone else in a big, big, big way. Turns out it wasn't much money to me, but it was to her. It meant everything to her that day. And so we did that little kindness, which was easy to do. I was glad to do it, and it gave me a blessing as well, because I was able to forget about that other thing that was actually annoying me. So kindness. It can help you with your own problems. So I've read this week that it can help you become healthier and even age more slowly. Did you know that? Now there's one that can get our attention. So just as feelings of stress produce stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, so feelings associated with kindness produce those kindness hormones that I was referring to earlier. It has a great effect on you. It even makes you more beautiful because you know what, or more good looking. When you're smiling, you're much better looking than you are with a scowl on your face, I guarantee. And even makes you look younger. Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to try that for that reason. So if stress increases the blood pressure, kindness reduces the blood pressure. Remember that. And those telomeres are known to be markers of aging. And they're known to grow or to lose length throughout our lives. And so the rate of losing length can be stopped with kindness. They've done several projects to research that, and with several tests that they've actually had people go out into the world, and especially those that practice loving kindness meditation. Is anyone familiar with that? Yes. And the loving kindness meditation is simply, and we'll go over it sometime, but it's very simply going in and meditating or prayer, whatever you call it. And as you do so, first, ask a blessing on yourself. Use compassion and love. How have I not loved myself today? Have I allowed someone else to treat me unkindly? If so, I'm not being kind to myself, am I? And then you go from seeing how you're feeling inside, you check in with the body, and then ask loving kindness for your family members, your friends, your community, and the world. And after you've practiced that loving kindness meditation, you will feel like you're born anew. You really will. It's a wonderful practice. Wonderful practice. I do it sometimes when I'm walking and use it as a walking meditation, and just to check in with the body and how I'm feeling. Ask if I'm being kind to my body. And it's very valuable. But we should not allow anyone to be unkind to us, including ourselves. So there's so many benefits that can be had with using kindness. It helps to reverse stress and depression. It improves our relationships. We know that. You can see that right off, can't you? If you're kind to the person you live with, it can make a big difference. We know that. And no one wants to be treated unkindly. So we treat another the way we want to be treated. So of course it improves relationships. And did you know it's contagious? Kindness is contagious. Try it out. Do a kindness for another. If you lived in a big city, you would have many, many opportunities, but we have many opportunities here too. So try kindness, and you'll see how contagious it is. And now I have a couple of stories I want to tell you. Our daughter, Jonna, that lives in Portland, Oregon, she said, well, Mom, she listens in on Sunday morning. She said, well, Mom, you know you've always been a storyteller. When we were little and riding in the car someplace, you were always telling us stories. And I said, I guess I have, haven't I? So I have a few stories for you today. There's a woman that told a story that she said that when she was young, she had a teacher named Mrs. Lake. She taught 6th grade. She says she kept her long auburn hair up in a barrette, showing off the drop earrings she always wore. She said, from my first moment in her class, I loved her, Mrs. Lake. Though I was a good student, I was shy about speaking up in front of my classmates and could easily be overlooked. Not that year with Mrs. Lake. She paid attention. She said that year was a hard one at home. My father's alcoholism had grown worse. At night when I lay in bed, I listened with dread, the pop of beer cans opening or the clink of ice cubes in a glass as whiskey was poured. Then came the loud, slurred voice from the kitchen, my mother's tears, the slamming of doors. She said, I always prayed before going to sleep, dear God, help make him stop. Dad was an attorney and meticulous about polishing his wingtips every morning before work. She said, so for Christmas, I took my babysitting money I'd saved and I bought the best shoe shine kit I could find. I was so excited on Christmas Eve when he opened the heavy box. But I watched in stunned silence while Dad, in an incomprehensible rage, took the gift I had given him and threw it up against the wall and broke it to pieces. She said, somehow, I thought I was to blame. How much safer I felt in Mrs. Lake's class. This was my sanctuary, the place where I felt appreciated. My papers coming back with her distinctive scrawl, my tests decorated with stars and smiley faces. When I gave oral reports standing in front of the class, my knees shaking, I looked in her encouraging eyes and my fears went away. I love Mrs. Lake. She said at the end of the year came the day for the parent-teacher conferences. Each student meeting with her parents and Mrs. Lake for a final evaluation and progress report. She said on the blackboard was an alphabetical listing of schedule with a 20-minute slot for each student and family. She was puzzled that her name had been put at the end of the list because her name began with a B. She said it didn't matter, my parents would not be coming. When I brought home papers with Mrs. Lake's glowing remarks, they ended up in the trash. They'd never been opened. Letters reminding them about the school conference were totally ignored. She said, so all day I sat there. I tried to stay busy with our assigned projects while the room mother escorted the classmates to their meetings with their parents and the teacher. Every 20 minutes, a different name was called. She said, I looked at the other parents. They were so loving and kind. I couldn't imagine having parents like that. Finally, after everyone's name had been called, Mrs. Lake opened the door and motioned for me to join her. She said there were 3 folding chairs in front of the desk, but Mrs. Lake took 2 of them, folded them up, and put them away, and then she sat in the chair next to her, and she became her parent that day. Mrs. Lake opened the grade book. She said, "First of all, I want you to know how much I love you." She said, "I saw all the warmth and compassion in those beautiful eyes that I have observed all year. Secondly," the teacher said, "you need to know it is not your fault that your parents are not here today. It is not your fault." She said it was the first time someone had said such a thing to her. For a moment she was scared because all of a sudden she knows that their secret is out. She's tried to keep the secret of her dysfunctional family away from everyone. But Mrs. Lake knows. Then she realized Mrs. Lake had known all along. Mrs. Lake said, "You deserve a conference whether your parents are here or not. You deserve to know how well I think you're doing." She took a stack of papers and congratulated her on the good grades, pointing out all of her strengths. She showed her diagnostic test scores and explained how highly she had ranked on each of the tests. She explained all of it. And the child said, "During that meeting, my perception changed because she saw me. She actually saw me, allowed me to see myself objectively because I knew Mrs. Lake cared for me. And I believed what she told me. My home situation was the same, but you see, after that, I was a different person." For a long moment, Mrs. Lake and I looked at each other in silence, she said. Then she gave me a hug. Afterwards, she gathered the papers and we returned to class. None of the child's friends ever asked what was said, and she never told them. She said those moments were too precious, too private, too wonderful to share with anyone. And in the growing years that followed were often difficult, but her teacher had given her an extraordinary gift. For the first time, she knew that she was worthy of being loved. It wasn't her fault. There are so many examples I could give you today, but you know what I'm speaking about. They're large. This was huge, what this teacher did. Teachers do that every day. Teachers are angels right here on this earth, enfolding our children with love. We need to appreciate them every day for what they do. But there's so many ways we see with empathy, don't we? Or we try to. I remember we were on a trip and Sherry and her family were with us, Dan and me, and we had gone to England, and from England we went to Scotland. And it's wonderful. You should go sometime once this COVID thing is over. And from there we went down to Liverpool, and yes, we saw the statue of the Beatles, and Wales, across the Irish Sea. We were in Dublin one day, and I think Andy, Sherry's son Andy, he was probably only about 13 then, and In Dublin, it was rainy and cold, and we were wearing our rain slickers. And by that time, we've seen a lot. And I know I was sort of wanting to go back to our rooms myself. So I observed Andy and his family, and Sherry and Al and Shelby were going to go on and walk some more, like 5 more miles in the rain, and see some more sights. And his shoulders are all slumped down, and he gets that look on his face, and he's thinking, I don't want to see any more old buildings, okay? No more old buildings. So I really saw that. I saw the pain on his face, and I said, Andy, you know what? I'm going back to the room. Would you like to walk back with me? And Dan, of course, was glad to go back with me, too. He said, yeah, Grandma. Turns to his mom, and he said, can I go with Grandma and Grandpa? Of course, they allowed him to. But I was thinking, all it took was for me to look at him, and that defeated look on his face. He was tired, went to his room. He could play his games, listen to his music, whatever it is that 13-year-olds do, instead of looking at all those old buildings. They didn't mean a thing to him. But there's so many ways that we can be kind. I had another story in the same little book of kindness stories that I have. And there was a man that had become a priest. And actually, he wasn't even sure how he had gone down that route, because he had a difficult life. His parents were very unkind to him, very unkind. Lived on the shores of Massachusetts, and they were always, his dad was putting him down, telling him he would never be anything but a clam digger. So he quit school, joined the Navy, and then sent himself to college, and then went to Catholic university and became a monk, actually. And he said he went back to visit his family, and he and his dad were walking along, and his dad says, well, you have your mom and me to thank for everything good that's happened in your life. He says, wow, Dad, you think? How do you come to that? And he said, well, we were always motivating you. What do you mean motivating me? Well, we didn't want you to get the big head, so we were always putting you down so you would try harder, work harder, and become a success. Because we did care for you. So he says, Dad, that's not the way to show your child that you care for them. That's not the way to show anyone that you care for them, is to put them down and tell them you'll never be anything but a clam digger. So those were just a few stories I wanted to tell you this morning, that just illustrations of how we can be kind. Just be kind. Be kind. You never know. When you see someone out on the street, you never know what they've been through. You never know what they have ahead of them, what they may have ahead of them this afternoon, the week ahead. So just be kind. And remember, it'll make you healthier, happier. Kindness will come back to you, and it's going to make you a lot more attractive. So here's to a kind week. I hope that kindness comes your way. Thank you for your time.